Even by his own standards, Jim White was excitable as he paced around the Scott Sports studio, still hours before it was time to go on air. "We've got the biggest story of the season," he said, beaming gleefully. It was Sunday, 17th of April 1994, and most of those in attendance at Ibrox the day before would have had to take a few moments to guess what it might be. Admittedly, the bar wasn't particularly high on a relatively unremarkable season in Scottish football. The Ferguson thing? There was hardly anything in that. Not so when slowed down and zoomed in, apparently. "He's in big trouble," White said, and so he would be. More trouble than could be dished out by the SFA at Park Gardens. 18 months later, Duncan Ferguson would be sentenced to 3 months in prison for his headbutting John McStay at Ibrox that afternoon. By the time he was sent down, he was no longer even a Rangers player. It had been the transfer that dominated the summer of 1993 and broke the record between two British clubs. David Murray spoke about it as taking Rangers to the next level after going so close only a few months before. "This is not necessarily the end of the spending," he said. "We are the biggest club in Britain and people had better realise it. There is no limit to our ambition." There's a hint of self-aware insecurity about "people had better realise it." Rangers had beaten English competition for this signing, and Murray made mention of having done so before, as if the landscape was the same when Terry Butcher and Trevor Stephen had first arrived, which of course it no longer was. Regardless, this was another transfer coup and a show of successful ambition. It would, however, turn into an abject failure. When it came to Duncan Ferguson, Rangers were in a bind of their own creation, seemingly unable to possibly let the opportunity pass. In terms of profile, he was almost perfect. Young, Scottish, talented, and from a Rangers family, he was exactly the kind of player that the club felt they needed to sign. He was a difficult personality, sure. By that time, Ferguson had one criminal conviction and another pending, but in Walter Smith, Rangers had one of the best man managers in the business. The problem was, it was a transfer that needed to happen that summer, at a time when Rangers already had a player in Ferguson's mould who was in the form of his life. Although aged 31, and with his next birthday fast approaching, Mark Hateley was hardly at retirement age and just enjoyed a blistering 2 seasons. With Ali McCoy still recovering from a broken leg, there was simply no way that Rangers were cutting their losses on the other half of their alchemic duo and resting all of their goal-scoring responsibilities on the shoulders of a 21-year-old with so much still to learn. Similar in style, the two couldn't play together. Similar in personality, neither would accept a season of apprenticeship and phased retirement. It couldn't work, and with no hope of a Scottish rival meeting Dundee United's valuation, in hindsight it was perhaps one best left to the new English Premier League. If Ferguson's season was something of a nightmare, then he wasn't alone in a Rangers dressing room full of broken, bruised and exhausted heroes with understudies who were woefully inadequate. Hateley, however, responded with extraordinary power to have the season of his dreams. It may not have been the tall centre-forward who was billed to steal the show, but for Rangers' sake, it was just as well one of them did. The summer of 1993 and all that went with it is our subject for this evening. This is Dominant. This is The Hangover, episode 1. Good evening, Andy McGowan. How are we?
I'm very good, thank you.
And in Athens, it's John Cowden. How are we, John?
Very well, thank you.
Okay, the sign of Big Dunk. It's been talked about for many years, really, with a lot of hindsight, and we're going to do maybe a wee bit of counterfactual history. I have all the time in the world for counterfactual history. I know it gets a bit of a bad rep, but history's supposed to explain why things happened the way that they did. In order to do that, you have to show the alternatives, but they need to be realistic. That's all I would say. We're going to do a bit of that just now, I think, because, John, you've got some feelings on this signing and what Rangers maybe should have done along with it. What are your thoughts on the options as lay in front of Walter Smith that summer?
Well, we had to make signings. We had to freshen up. I'd seen this before, summer of 76, summer of 78, when we rest on our laurels with a team that has flogged itself to death, collectively and individually. So we've got to do something. If we are going to make this impact in Europe, we're going to need good Scottish players. And we are entering a period where there aren't too many, and the competition from, shall we say, down south, in terms of buying power, is coming into vogue. Now, I'm trying to avoid the great thing of hindsight or whatever, but it's unavoidable because you can see how history is going. But for me, I don't know know you disagree to quite an extent, Martyn. I don't know where everybody else is. I thought Duncan Ferguson was the signing that had to happen. And I would have jettisoned Hateley at this point, or kept him for 6 to 9 months and cashed in. Because let's face it, the way the Scottish League is at the moment, as we sit in the summer of '93 and where we are, I think me, you and Andy could have been the front three and still we would have cantered that league. So it wasn't that much a risk. Maybe I'm jaundiced by Parlin and Johnson from when I was growing up. But, I mean, he's coming up to, he was 21, coming up to 22. He's almost 10 years younger than Hateley. And he's a Scottish international. He's come in that sort of, that West Germany game where, I think you're going to correct me, but I thought he hit the crossbar with a thunderous shot. And that much of a risk. And as for all the baggage, one conviction and one pending. I think we've got one or two others in that Rangers team kicking about who maybe have a similar rep at that point or had done in the previous 5-6 years. Step forward, Ian Durrant and perhaps Ali McCoist. So, yeah, we needed freshening up, and it wasn't the only one we should have made. I think we'd have got decent money for Hateley at that point. And was it an abject failure? Well,
yes.
Even it didn't work. We got our money back, and we made Hateley play the season of his life on the back of it. And I mean, after this season, Hateley doesn't really contribute much anywhere. He's kind of done.
He'll give us another half.
Yeah,
he'll give us another half in 94, 95. All I would say, and again, it's why it has to be realistic. No one, zero supporters were calling for Mark Hateley to be sold in the summer of 1993. Walter Smith. Now, when we do this kind of, again, hindsight is fine. That's how history works. We look at the past. That by nature we have to use a bit of hindsight. What we can't do is overly criticise, and I think I've been overly critical of Smith in hindsight. Because as I said in the introduction, Rangers were always going to make this signing. He fitted the bill. He ticked so many boxes. He was one of the two genuinely promising young players from Scotland that were not at Rangers or Celtic. So I get it, but it was just the timing was wrong. If Dundee United could have held on, if we were talking about the summer of 1994, I think we're talking about a completely different ball game. It was never going to work. And with McCoy having a broken leg, you don't know at that stage if people are going to come back at all. Certainly not. He's certainly not going to come back to that ridiculous form. So Rangers likely are going to lose some of that magic that we've enjoyed up front. There is no danger Walter Smith, the Walter Smith that we know, because you got to put yourself in those same shoes, he is not giving up what he can rely on. And he's not going to risk losing a title because he has to freshen things up and for longer term good. 9 in a row is now locked in. Whether we like that in hindsight or not, it is. So I think he was always going to do it, but I think it was just the wrong timing. And I just don't think he was ready, John. And I know you're talking about Durrant and McCoy, and absolutely those similar kind of... He could conceivably, now it would have been at the harsh end of the law, but he could have conceivably gone to prison in September. We don't know that yet. No other Scottish rival is going to pay the money, so we wouldn't lose out directly by a competitor being strengthened. Sometimes it's just not the right time, and adults have to say, yep, sorry. If I could play hindsight, and again realistic hindsight, because saying, well, what Hateley could have done is just kind of taken a backward step and kind of moulded him and helped him, or that Smith could have just sold Hateley. That isn't realistic. You might as well tell me now what Smith really should have done is just go and sign Romario, because it makes as much sense and is just as realistic. The realistic options I think that summer of 93 for Rangers, to use that 4 million and even get a bit of change out of it. Gordon Durie, from the start, is a willing runner and worker for Hateley, and the other big talent coming through, Alan McLaren, because our defence actually is the shambles in the big hole at the end of that 92-93 season that is hanging together, and that's really, I think, where a bit of prudence should maybe have been shown as well. We get these players eventually, of course, but those deals possibly could have been done. I know Durie's relationship with Ardila is soured, and that led to that signing late in the season, but that is a better fit for what we needed. But I go back again, Rangers were always making this signing. Andy, your thoughts on what could have happened, what did happen, how it all transpired?
I think we need to stop for a second and remember what an exciting talent this guy was, and there was a bit of fervour around signing him. And also, after the season we'd had and how close we'd been at the Champions League final or the European Cup final, there wasn't a clamour for a rebuild, despite the fact that I think the more savvy amongst us knew that team were going to be knackered and there was going to be a price to pay in terms of physical repercussions. So there wasn't a rebuild on the cards, and it was a case of, right, well, how do we make us better? And this guy, he'd made a name for himself in Scotland. That Scotland game against West Germany you referred to was a bit of a sensation. I mean, you look back, it was over sensationalised. I mean, he never scored. He never hit the crossbar. He had a scissor kick that captured the imagination. And he just looked like a player that was going to get better and better and better. He had all the raw attributes. He was unique in his style. He was just a fantastic talent. So I think that Rangers been interested in him, and also the thrill of the chase, because obviously Dundee United, being Dundee United under Jim McLean as chairman, they didn't want to sell to us. And it was also a case of us flexing our muscles as well. You know, we blew, who was it? Was it Leeds United that were in for him?
It was
blew
Leeds,
them out the water.
Yeah.
We blew them out the water with a premium to buy them.
Yeah.
But as you said, Hateley, he was 31. If this makes sense, my recollection was he was an old 31. And what I mean by that
is a lot of miles.
He was a warhorse. And we knew that we weren't going to get that, a player that had that style of play, doing what he did forever. But in reality, Ferguson drove him to new heights. So to answer your question, Martyn, right player, rank time, and it's a massive case of what could have been. I
take John's point as well, maybe about the abject failure. I mean, Duncan Ferguson, the Rangers player, is an abject failure. The deal itself, getting money back, I think even a wee bit more, and also the impact it had on Hateley is big. The impact on Hateley was immediate. Whenever they get back from Italy, Hateley changed his training number back to 10. He was up for this. They had sessions in Italy where they make a run, make a pass out, get a run into the box, wait for the cross to come in. Hateley would do one thing, Ferguson would mimic it like exactly. This would go on for quite a while until Ferguson got a bit of a duff cross and just mishit it, and so Hateley kind of got 1-0. How he fitted into the dressing room has been a bit of an issue. I think there was maybe some closeness, physical closeness between him and Hateley at one point, but they were obviously in Italy, back at Il Choco, and on his arrival they were in a team bus for a night out. And he told the team he was there to take them to the next level. Now, this is a team, obviously, who had done very well the season before without him. I think Durant took the first bite. He said, you big skinny drip of water, you're only here so the big man can have a day off now and again. Ferguson come back with his goal scoring record at Dundee United. Durant come back saying, you've won fuck all apart from your BB Youth Shield and the Forfarshire Cup. And then he said, well, that's Dundee United's fault. It's Dundee United's fault they didn't win anything, which didn't impress David Dodds, who absolutely, I think, eviscerated them in the bus. And just Stuart Weir, who was there with the Evening Times, and he was there as part of the press. And you get the kind of tone that he'd been put in his place, and the Rangers scored maybe not quite as convinced. A couple were, which was Gough and McCoist, who were quite very obviously tapping him up. In fact, Rangers would be fined $5,000 or so in the January 93 for very publicly kind of stating their intentions. Gough and McCoist took him after a Scotland trip to Ibrox and showed him around, even pointed out where he would be sitting in the dressing room and whatever. So yeah, it was clear that he had admirers, but his transition in the dressing room maybe wasn't a smooth one. John, you mentioned the Germany game at Ibrox, funnily enough, this friendly, where the legend of Big Dunk grew. He was sensational that night. And that legend is really the word, because the SFA, even on their website for years, when they've got an entry for everyone who has a cap, and they explained that night, as Ferguson rattling the crossbar. He doesn't. Kipka makes a brilliant save from an overhead kick. He starts the move, brilliant ball out, he gets himself into position. It's such an angle, such a hard one to take, and he absolutely catches it flush. So Bayern Munich were said to be interested after that. It was Leeds. Leeds did a deal with Dundee United, who did not want to sell to Rangers. In fact, part of that deal, which was for 3.25, was that they would never sell to Rangers. And I think they released a statement on 3rd of July saying, we'll be having a press conference on Monday, after weeks of talking. It's kind of done. They're publicly saying he was coming, until things went cold. He only wanted to go one place. Rangers, as you said, Andy, had to pay a premium to get him there. The deal was really 3.75 plus another £250,000 when Ferguson made 200 appearances for Rangers, which was always assumed that he would do, so that's why the deal was quoted at 4 million. So technically the outlay was the biggest that summer. The other big one in Britain being Roy Keane from Manchester United, or to Manchester United, from Nottingham Forest. So a British transfer record, which I don't think Murray was too bothered about at all. Certainly too bothered about paying. He was quite happy, I think, for Rangers to kind of break that record. So it was the kind of story of the summer. Weirdly, Hateley seemed genuinely surprised, genuinely stunned when it was announced when he was in Italy, even though it's been going on for ages. And he's said to remark £4 million, hell of a lot of money for a sub. So he was going to go into full turbo mode, and well, as I said, thank Christ he did. Other Rangers players.
I mean, can I come back and a couple of points? On McLaren, definitely we should have signed him, but that is hindsight. I think we have high hopes at this point, and don't laugh for Presley as coming through as
probably
the centre half and not need to do it. Jury, actually, we should have signed him if we get rid of McSwiggan, regardless. Because
should have signed that.
If you know McCoy, you know McSwiggan, you do need the small guy to go with it. In terms of signing with Ferguson, actually still there 13 months later. If even he goes to the summer of 95, 94, is it really that much a thing? Because the 4 seasons after it, he plays more games and scores more goals at a higher level than Hateley. And given, as Andy said, we're expecting some of this team to fall apart or be likely to have lots of injuries. Hateley must be your number one candidate, because he's never played as many games in a season as he had done in 92, 93.
Yeah.
I think 40, 42. Given the style of play he is, his age, if you were saying somebody's going to pick up knocks and go down, I think actually you're saying it's him.
And and Smith knows that, and again, part of the theory is good, that this is succession planning. All I'm saying is, these are not two players who are going to deal with that. Ferguson is not going to be, is not prepared to sit about, be the apprentice, and finesse his undeniable talent, training with, other than Alan Shearer, the best in Britain at that type of role at that minute in time, and he was.
Absolutely,
but he's never going to do that. He jumped in the Scotland scene.
You don't know who's going to do it. You don't know who's going to do. You don't know which horse is going to run. But having 2 horses running, we get the season of a life out of Hateley, I would argue, in the back of it, and we get more money back on Ferguson. It's actually not bad man management, but it doesn't work out because we blow the 4 million. And we don't spend anything else.
Yeah, well, that's just the thing.
That squad.
It's an opportunity cost, isn't it? Though that's the thing. We don't. Yeah.
Yeah, because you look how much Murray spends in subsequent seasons.
Yeah.
If he'd went out and bought, as you say, Jury, McLaren, Stephen Wright kicking about, all the players he buys over the next 2 or 3 seasons of Scottish things.
Yeah.
Because the other thing Ferguson gives you is in Europe.
Yeah.
He is one of you then can play three foreigners, and you don't need to. One of them may not be Haley for whatever reason. It gives you options for that strategy. You should be spending money, not just in the one. This was Murray to a T, wasn't it? Put everything on one number, never mind black or red. He was going for the number. I mean, go out and say, right, we're going to spend 10 million this summer, Walter. That's you for the next 3 seasons or 2 seasons, unless you can sell people. We're going to buy young, we're going to buy Scottish, and this is going to be, because 93, 94, you're talking about domestic rivals. We don't have a domestic rival. Let's be honest.
Not over the long course, no.
They are all, okay, cups can come and go, as we'll discover, but league is a foregone conclusion. I mean, it literally is at this point. We are dreadful, as we'll discover, in this league campaign, and we win it in a canter. I mean, the points at the end of the season, nothing, but that's because we take 2 points out of 10 at the end of it. I mean, it is literally a canter, despite us being less than great.
Okay. It'll surprise no one, and it'll be apt that Ferguson was injured when he arrived at Rangers, a kind of hangover from the previous season at Dundee United. And he would not be the only one. McCoist, of course, broken leg. Andy Gorham, who we've talked about in the previous shows in 92-93, hadn't trained since March. He'd played, but he couldn't train because of that posterior ligament injury. He goes to Los Angeles on 3rd of July, 4th of June, to go undergo that surgery and just get the appropriate rest. Scottish Player of the Year the summer of 1993, and deservedly so. People forget that because of McCoist's, exploits, Hateley's brilliance. That the Scottish Player of the Year was Andy Gorham. He would find himself in a very, very different situation the summer of 94, which of course we will come to. Ali Maxwell was the replacement. And let's not be too revisionist about this, because at this minute in time, in the summer of 1993, the reputation of Ali Maxwell is not in the mud. Ali Maxwell is not a diddy. Ali Maxwell is the cup-winning hero of only 2 years ago for Motherwell in 91. He'll be okay as a replacement. That's the general thought process that summer. It might not turn out that way. Other farewells, Andy. Scott Nisbet he suffered that groin injury at Parkhead, the game after his heroics in Bruges, how cruel football can be. And he was told that summer by 3 different specialists, you'll just give it up because it's just not going to ever heal, and you're going to make yourself worse. So, we lost him, a very functional utility player, very worthwhile player to have around the ground. Another hero from that Champions League campaign, the man who started it all, I guess, Gary McSwiggan. He goes to Notts County for 400 grand. Dale Gordon goes to West Ham for 750. So, there's over £1 million raked in. Any memories of those farewells, Andy? I mean, we have to sell players, but the Nisbet thing was tragic, actually.
Looking at it now, it was tragic. I think at the time, the Rangers support were a bit, I say mercenary, but that's probably the right word. We were a bit inured to this kind of stuff because it was easy come, easy go with a lot of players. We were used to the trading that we've spoken about in previous chapters about the soonest time. But Nisbet came through the ranks. He was never ever going to be a superstar, but he had get better and he'd made the best of what he had in terms of ability. I remember he used to work with sprint coaches, stuff like that, to work on aspects of his game. So he contributed to that fantastic run, and obviously he's immortalised with that goal against Bruges. But to lose his career at 25 was pretty tragic, and you just wonder what was the impact of that season, playing through the pain, taking injections, that kind of stuff. Dale Gordon contributed as well. Obviously, the Leeds double header, he was integral. But he'd done his bit. And I don't think it was never a case of these players or Gordon and McSwagan in particular that somebody's saying, oh, we should be keeping him or no. It wasn't because we always had somebody else to come in. This is the thing. It was always a case of, all right, who's next? And they're going to be better. Spend some money, you know. So it wasn't. I don't think there's many players that left Rangers where the fans had a regret. I've got to say that.
Trevor Stephen, maybe 91.
Well,
we understood the money. We couldn't say no, but
that
was maybe the first sign. We're like, all right, someone's going on to bigger things rather than we don't need these guys anymore.
That's a fair shout.
John, I don't know if it's a fair question because it's a long time has passed. Can you, McCoy is said broken leg. Gorham is now out until January. You've got Nisbet having to call it quits. Gary Stevens still hasn't returned and wouldn't return for the absolute start. Can you remember there being a feeling that, you know what, this might not just be picking up where we left off at Parkhead in that Scottish Cup final? These guys have been through the wars, or was there just an expectation that an expectation that they'll just all they need is a bit of a rest, a summer, good pre-season, and back we go again? And also, just pick up on Andy's point, right, where we're seeing numbers go out the door, and obviously Ferguson's been the big thing, but did you maybe expect more to be coming through? And by more, I don't mean getting Fraser Wishart on trial for a bit and then signing him as a free transfer. I know, breaking the record was an exciting deal, but we've lost 3 players there. We have a number of players out. Did you maybe just expect just a few more bodies in, even if they were the old Souness, expediency signings?
Yeah, I think it was more when people were going out. Because if you look, McSwiggan goes out and it leaves us really short up front. Because you've got Ferguson and Hateley who are not going to play together. Big man and bigger man, or whatever you want to call it. So and McCoy's out with a broken leg, and who knows? And usually when they come back after that, as we discover, even if they come back, they pick up lots of niggles. So you expect another striker, of which Jury will come in much later, but as you say, should have came in the summer. You actually understand the Wishart because of, it's a right back, it's a short-term thing. Gary Stevens might come in, whatever. But we're looking a bit threadbare on that right side because you don't know how Gary Stevens is going to go. Dale Gordon's going out. You've got Miko and Huster on the other side. I'll put my hand up and say I was quite relaxed about Ali Maxwell at this point.
Everyone was, John. Everyone was.
So, I'm not going to go. I can revise a lot of opinions, and I would still have kept Hateley. I'm arguing from if you were looking at it strategically, but in the summer, I think we just thought we were going to go on. But are we gambling on youngsters coming through? I think you mentioned that in the bus back to Bruges about Neil Murray, who had looked more than decent. So you think, and was getting shuffled about. You're seeing Presley, can he do a job at centre half? You I don't remember Moore coming in, but is there somebody in the youth? And we're not, my generation are not Souness. It's not all about spending. We are used to, from me in the 70s, we're used to youngsters coming into a mature team and either doing a job for maybe 6 months and then, petering out, or staying. Either Alec Kahara or Derek Parlane or whatever. But there just is that the right-hand side looks particularly weak and the forward line looks particularly weak because you've either go throw a big man up front or throw an even bigger man up front. Where is the variety coming through? We're going to push Durant up into that slot again. I didn't quite understand McSwiggan. Well, I did understand McSwiggan going. I didn't understand not having a replacement of someone smaller, more mobile. And this right-hand side, because I'm actually astonished when I looked at it. I was astonished how often Gary Stevens played in 93, 94. Because I thought he was done after that tackle with the Airdrie.
Yeah,
and he played a few games or whatever, but it never stuck in my mind that he was, he played as many as he did this season.
Took him a while to get in, but he did.
And then Nisbet, this was one of these underrated guys. I thought he was never going to set, but he was a really good squad player for us, and that's not damned a faint praise. He would come in and do a decent job, right back, centre half. You could even lob him up front instead of Haitley if that was it. And then if you look at his successors in terms of Alec Cleland, Gary Boland or whatever, he's far and away better than that. And it was a tragedy for the guy. Not even to be said, look, not going to make it at Rangers, but, you know, you can go and play Hearts and Nunn or whatever. But to be said, look, that's you done at 25. I mean, that through overplaying, taking injections, wear and tear. I mean, 25-year-old is no age for wear and tear. And he was a big loss that way because he could slot in. He was that utility player that maybe not at Champions League level, but certainly Scottish Premier League level, he would get you by the majority of games pretty comfortably. He wouldn't be 100%, but he'd be there. So we're lacking. I mean, and all in the back of we've made 5 million or whatever the number was for the Champions League. If ever there was a summer we had a bit of cash to spend, it's that summer.
It's a weirdly frugal and prudent and sensible year by David Murray. Rangers report a profit in 1993. Yeah. It's an interesting one. Another absence to talk about, this time not for Rangers but for Scotland in the summer of 93, was Richard Gough, who declared that he would not play for Andy Roxburgh again, and by definition probably because his replacement was going to be Craig Brown, he was not going to play for Scotland again. This was on June the 1st. There's a long story to this. It came to, I guess, a head with comments that Roxburgh had made about Gough's replacement Brian Irvine after a World Cup qualifier win over Estonia. Now, Gough had pulled out the squad after just this massive season with Rangers, Scottish Cup final just coming up the following weekend, and Roxburgh said Brian Irvine is really impressing me and he's a great will to play for us. Who knows which players will come in and make themselves indispensable. Irvine is so dependable, and last night he was starting to order people around during the game, and I thought, this guy is really settling into this. Young players need reliable, steady influences around them, and Irvine is like a rock. Now, those are the kind of comments international managers make about kind of younger debutants maybe, but not a 20-year-old with no great international future ahead of him. I think he would play 5 more times for Scotland. It was a pointed reference to Gough in particular about players prioritising club over country. This is in the back of just not being impressed at all by the methods of Roxburgh and Craig Brown. After working with Jock Stein and Alex Ferguson at Scotland, Roxburgh's name just made Souness laugh, apparently, at Ibrox, and that antipathy never really softened. He'd obviously no time for Roxburgh's card games and that flight home from Saudi Arabia. Exasperated by Brown's obsession with deportment rather than coaching, he would be painting the tape on players' socks so that they match the colour of the new kit. He was enraged at Roxburgh's misleading use of the press in relation to his injury at Italia 90 and a European Championship qualifier against Switzerland. Frustrated that players been played out of position so that the manager's favourites could remain. And finally, that infamous night in Lisbon where Scotland were hammered 5-0 by Portugal, and Roxburgh's team was set up to play against a side without their key man, Rui Barros, whom Craig Brown was reliably informed by a local taxi driver would miss the match. Of course, he did not, and he scored the first goal, and they ran riot. Ultimately, I think Gough viewed the national setup as something that was well beneath what he was used to, and the tension between Rangers and Scotland, one that had been brewing again since this, I guess since the Souness Revolution, was maybe entering a new phase here. John, we're going to talk about this quite a lot over the next few weeks, I think. Your memories of the captain's decision to tell Roxburgh to bolt?
Absolutely delighted. I think what I've said in previous pods, I have complete disdain for Scotland. Going back many years, but particularly under Roxburgh, the thing that stands out in my mind, and I think this is true, is at Italia 90, he made them all leave the keys in the outside of the hotel room door so he could check up on them. He was a school teacher. It was a Jordan Hill College mafia at school. And, you know, from him wanting to make sure they were all tucked up in bed at night to colouring in things, they just, school trip stuff, and actually, I was more upset. The one who should have told them to bolt was McCoist, who I thought was treated really badly by Roxburgh in 1990. Would be again, I think 96 and 98 when I thought he should have went to the World Cup. And I was delighted because I was sick of this. Because I couldn't see Scotland's ambition was not to be embarrassed. And I thought, well, what's the point in turning up if your only ambition is not to be embarrassed? And that's what it was from 1978, but it really definitely was at this point. Let's see if we can qualify, and once we get there, well, the support can go. It's a stag weekend, and let's not embarrass ourselves. And that's not where I want to be. I want my team, Rangers, I want them to turn up, and I want to go into the season thinking we have a chance at least, or we'll give it our best bet. And yeah, I'm delighted that Gough's told them, because you're looking at a stupid 44-game season and you're thinking, really? And what benefit do you get from playing for Scotland? Because it is in a downward trajectory at this point. They haven't, I think they're struggling. I'm not sure they're out of it yet.
They are out of it,
struggling to qualify.
First World Cup missed.
World Cup 94.
In 24 years or whatever.
Yeah.
Andy, your thoughts on this particular decision? And it wasn't just about Gough. I think they said something about, as I said, the prioritisation and not the start of a split, but I think the further opening of a split between the Rangers support and the national team that really is going to start to rupture over the next few years.
I mean, you can trace it back to them, but there was also a change in the footballing dynamic, and that, you know, the Scotland or SFA appointed Roxburgh, who by and large nobody had heard of. Now, he was a big shot in the SFA, but he was basically a glorified school teacher, and there was a wee bit of what's the word, infantilization. Is that even a word, Martyn? Used to tell me.
Infantilization is a word, yeah.
Is that a word? Good. Sweating there. But basically, they as you say, they get treated like school kids on a school trip, and for players like Gough, who, let's face it, had a fairly well-formed ego, as did Souness before him. People like that were like, what is this? And they didn't need it. They didn't need it as a bottom line. If he'd been younger and early in his career, I wonder if he'd have made the same decision. So it creased that fracture. I think, like John is saying, I couldn't have cared less. It chucked Scotland. The kind of any form of feeling or emotion towards the Scottish national team were fleeting and few and far between. You know, I think 1992 Euros the last time I felt any kind of affinity with that club, with that football.
Pre-season, a couple of matches to maybe just briefly talk about. Rangers hadn't been down south for a friendly, and a youth friendly in inverted commas, for 7 years. That must have been the Spurs game when Souness arrived. They went down to Roker Park, beat Sunderland 3-1, but the headlines were all about what happened off it. 3 people suffering knife wounds, 35 arrests. I don't think there were many charges, actually, in the end. Murray was furious. This will not be tolerated by a club which has worked so hard to improve its image in the international stage and the image of Scottish football in general. It is not on, and as soon as we identify those who have been arrested and charged, they will be informed by the club that they are no longer welcome at Ibrox or at any other stadium where Rangers are playing. It is not a subject for debate. It is final. The other pre-season match of note was Ali McCoist's testimonial at Ibrox against another club from the northeast, of course, Kevin Keegan's very upwardly mobile Newcastle United. It was 2-1 to the Premier League team in the end, but my memory, Andy, of this night, I don't know if you were there, I'm sure you were, Ali in his blue blazer, of course not quite ready to play yet. He's still hobbling about, actually. Was it Newcastle just looked far sharper? And again, your Rangers, biggest club in Britain, were still the best. Forget about this Manchester United, forget about this Premier League thing. This was it was a pre-season friendly, I know that, but this was a wee bit of a wake-up call for me, I remember.
I'd agree. I remember it being a great night. The Newcastle fans brought a lot to that.
Yeah.
I remember Andy Cole looking as sharp as a striker could be, and we get beat, and I wouldn't say it was a lesson or anything like that, but as you say, more insightful bears would have been sitting there saying, this is, for de facto European Cup final, our semi-finalists the year before, we should be doing a wee bit better than this. So it was probably a sign of the flat and static nature of the summer and where we were going to be that particular season.
John, I don't know. I really I'm loath to put too much credence on any pre-season results, certainly. But we've all been to games where we've thought, oh dear, or we've thought, oh, actually, we look the business here. Sometimes we get proved very right, sometimes very wrong. Can you remember much of that night? And just, I guess, and it was their sharpness and their pace and the movement. And Rangers, we're going to talk a wee bit about this over the next few weeks this season, especially when Smith tries to shoehorn both of these giant strikers in. We are direct and we're clumsy, and they were not. It was a really sharp, incisive kind of performance.
I wasn't surprised. The previous season, I'd spent a bit of time working down the northeast, and I remember a Sunderland fan telling me away from earshot. He said Newcastle, who'd just come up, I think they'd just come up that season, they won the championship. He said Keegan's got them playing phenomenally well. And so when they're knocking it about, I don't pay a lot of attention to pre-season. Mainly, I wouldn't say I'm blasé, but I almost always expect us to have a dreadful one because that's usually what we do. And, it was only the year before we'd get absolutely taken apart, same scoreline, by Martyn, who were infinitely better than Newcastle. But Newcastle are on a very upward trajectory, as we'll see in the hindsight. I think they finished third this year and then below it the next year when they should have won the league. Because
2 years later, 95.
Yeah. So, they have some brilliant players and they're knackered. Gorham won't have played. Coist, as you say, is wearing blue, but it's a blazer. And, our lack of signings, etc., everybody's just a bit tired, so there is a worry, but it's July, it's fine. Then you go to, the weirdest thing is that I was actually at Sunderland. I was in Nottingham and drove up to the game, went into work the next morning, thinking what a cracking atmosphere, two sets of fans got on brilliantly, for everybody to start saying, did you see that in GMTV this morning? What happened? Were you okay? Was there a riot? It was like, what on earth are we talking about here? Because actually, where I was outside the ground and walking around, atmosphere was decent. There was good camaraderie between the fans. So it was one of those, I have no idea what happened. I really don't. But Newcastle were a cut above. You could see they were a coming team. They were a hungry team. Their fans were on that. They'd been in the doldrums, and suddenly, Keegan, probably since the last time he played for them, now the manager, had suddenly got them, playing in a fantastic style. Keegan was almost like a Tim's manager, wasn't he? On that sort of...
Yeah.
He was almost Tommy Burns-esque. Better than him, better players, but it had all that over-emotional, hyped up, boomer bust. And they were it was a cracking night. And he says the atmosphere was good. You always worry in pre-season, but I don't know. What can you read into it? It's one of you can only read into it in hindsight and say, I knew we were going to do that, because as you say, there are pre-seasons where we've been abject and it turns out fantastic, and there's been pre-seasons where you think we're really looking the business and we blow up before the clocks go back. So maybe I was too blasé, but I didn't have a high expectation. I think at this point, this is when we're thinking, you don't think we should be buying one or two, okay, no £4 million players, but
some life.
Get the money from Dale Gordon, Gary McSwiggan, and push it back out there. We've got the £5 million. At this point, we're expecting a decent run in Europe, let's be honest. We're not banking on it completely, but there is an expectation. We know how to get through these European things. There is a confidence and overconfidence as it transpires. But if you're going to go for it, this is a time when you probably lash out a few quid, as I said, and you get in a a few players just to. And the weird thing is, we get Jury in, but what, 3 months, 4 months late, instead of actually were we not going for him the previous November?
Well, we'll come to this with you guys in a couple of weeks. But yeah, Chick Young's exclusive in the November of 1992. Just a year out, Chico. A wee footnote. The summer of '93, we're obviously still talking about last season and how brilliant it was, and so was Silvio Berlusconi. Certainly we would not accept the Champions Cup if Olympique are stripped of it. If allegations against the French team are proven, then we would ask UEFA to repeat the cup final, this time against Rangers. It would be a fair solution. This was on the 1st of July, as UEFA are still struggling to deal with the fallout from the Marseille scandal, but in reality never quick enough. They were never stripped of that title, as I said, and that playoff never took place, but there was a bit of talk about it. If talk of a Munich replay was just an attempt to keep that exciting spirit of 92-93 alive, then hopes of adventure were dampened by the Rangers manager himself before a competitive ball had even been kicked. This is quite the pre-season interview. Smith said, "It's vital that I do everything to ensure that this club's success continues. Everything has become muddled but with winning the treble, but I don't think everyone really believes we will do so again as though it is automatic. I can't say to you that the entertainment level of the team's performances will improve this season. I might want that to be the case, but the Premier Division won't make it possible. Having to play 65 games plus international matches demands too much of the best players and the best teams. And although there will be good matches, some great goals and moments of excitement, I can't say Rangers will be more entertaining to watch this time around. You see, brilliance needs a fresh mind, and Scottish football, the way it's been developed, dulls the brain." Andy, not exactly inspiring stuff, but typically honest with Smith. I had another 44 game endurance season. I mean, what Smith? How's he going to beat last year? Going to get to the European Cup final? That's a tall order in and of itself. But I thought his comment about a fresh mind is intriguing. Smith's been Rangers manager just over 2 years. He's lifted 6 trophies. What more was there to reinvent the wheel here in this kind of attritional slog where he knew, as John's intimated at the start, he's got the overwhelming stockpile of firepower. But for much of the following 2 years and perhaps beyond, this little interview would be quite opposite. I thought it was quite a striking choice of words.
It's very candid for Walter Smith, because we know that he handled the media well even in his early years at Rangers, but I think it was prescient. I think he was correct. It was probably a wee bit of dampening expectations at the same time. And, I think he was probably looking at the fact that the squad hadn't changed, bar Duncan Ferguson. He probably knew in his heart of hearts that Duncan Ferguson, as a 21-year-old, wasn't going to come in and do what he suggested, which is take us to another level. And he probably realised that there was too many miles on the clock for some of those players, and the injuries were going to catch up for us at some point that specific season. It's fairly downbeat, because what we've spoken about in this series is that it's just been the never-ending juggernaut of power that is Rangers in every aspect on and off the park. It kind of culminated in the 92-93 season where we all nearly captured it, the ultimate prize. And it sounds now, looking back on it with hindsight, as a bit of a reset of expectations altogether. We've spoken about the fact that we more or less guaranteed the league without, it need to take something utterly cataclysmic for us to surrender the league. So maybe he knows that in his heart of hearts it's a case of, you'll win this, but we don't really need to get into 4th or 5th gear to do this. It's strange. I wasn't aware of the comments, man. I've got to say, I can't remember them at all. But when you look at the season we're about to talk about, and the season after especially, it's really bang on the money.
It's maybe a guy feeling that fatigue himself. I mean, he's not running about anymore. But
10's 2 seasons.
Yeah, can you have a very full introduction to managerial life? He's already, lived that as an assistant through this, turmoil and upheaval and revolution. He's probably, I think everyone at the club maybe just wants a breather, despite what they may say publicly, certainly the chairman. John, the opening game against Hearts, it kind of sets a tone really when it was a dreadful game of football. Another injury, this time Stuart McCall. Rangers win 2-1. Mark Hateley goal made the overall difference. But even that has this kind of sense of weird poetry to it, in terms of summing up just this battle that Rangers were in, this endurance test. He spoke to me on the time capsule a few months ago when his book was out, and he said that was pure anger, that header. It was a header in the second half to make it 2-1. Craig Levein literally tried to break my leg on the halfway line 10 minutes before. For the next 10 minutes I could not wait to put the ball in the net or break him in half. That was the only thing that was going through my head. The header that day, I wasn't even looking to head the ball. I wanted to smash Levein. He ducked out the way and the ball hit me on the head. This game and the next Saturday in Perth, where Rangers won 2-1, a dreadful Gough error, let St Johnstone in. He made amends with a great header of his own. Ian Ferguson scrambled second half winner. Again, you will know better than me, because you're used to Rangers starting badly, and we'd started badly last year, Dens Park, etc, etc. But at least Dens Park was chaotic. There was a big flow to that. We did look clunky.
We did look clunky before Dens Park. What was it, 1-0 and 2-0 were first two games of the pre? It's kind of expected and hoped for, but I mean, it's only when you're looking at it and you're seeing this 44-game league plus League Cup, Scottish Cup, and we have an ambition in Europe, and you're just thinking you cannot possibly perform at that level, or at a real high level. As Smith says, I wasn't aware of his comments either, for 60-odd games. I mean, you're just looking at it and you're thinking, yeah, it's probably not bad to start off slowly, because even if we have the odd slip up early on, the odds are that we will power through the winter. No one will be able to stay with us. We'll get through the first couple of rounds of the League Cup, because we're playing, I think that's it, we'll be playing probably some minor teams. And there's no European games until mid-September, unlike now. So if you're going to actually, if you're talking about managing a season, having a slow start and sort of grinding into it maybe isn't the worst, rather than completely running out of steam come February, March. And we've done that previous. I mean, we won the treble and we won with the Scottish Cup. But, I mean, those last, 10, 15, 20 minutes against Aberdeen, I mean, there was nothing left in the tank. I wouldn't have liked to have gone to extra time in that game or whatever. I mean, the team was done, and that was them coming off on a, being fresh, everybody fit. So there is this, I'm not overly worried. I've seen it before, but also there's a rational thing of, okay, there's nothing. We're not going to lose too much in August, apart from embarrassment. We're missing McCoist. We're missing a striker. As you say, we already started playing Big Duncan at left wing or something weird, or is that
not quite yet.
Not
quite yet. Duncan hasn't made an appearance yet, and the tension is starting to build. We'd hope to see him at Roker Park. We'd hope to see him at Ibrox for Ali's testimonial. No appearance yet. He makes his appearance at Parkhead in the third league game of the season. With Hateley up front, it was not the best game. Defence is on top, but again, with Rangers with two huge players, I'm not sure how creative anyone was expecting us to be. But Ferguson looked bright. He had two efforts, one in each half, where he kind of came deep to kind of win the ball for himself, and he showed a bit of skill and a bit of drive to get into a good position. Got shots away, but they're long range efforts. It wasn't the best game. I don't remember walking away feeling overly disappointed. 0-0. 5 points out of 6. It's not a bad start. My overwhelming memories are walking up with just people with loads of Andrex in their hands. If you remember the final Old Firm game of the season before, that followed kind of planned that flag day, and it was quite spectacular. This was the bog roll day. And the BBC captured it beautifully from the Celtic end. The Rangers end looked absolutely tremendous, I have to say. But that was about the only memorable thing from that afternoon, Andy, apart from Ferguson's effort, especially that first one in the first half with Bonner troubled a wee bit, but it was still tentative and Rangers just kind of scratching around.
I was there, and the thing I remember, it's funny how you even remember daft things, was there was a kind of pride in us rolling out our £4 million striker, because Celtic were still in their arse, let's face it, and we were bringing out this £4 million best talent in Scotland. He made a point of warming up right in front of the jungle for his entire warm-up before the game, Duncan Ferguson. So I don't think he could have been any closer to the jungle, the touchline over there. But the game itself was about a damp squib. I think the shots that you referred to with Ferguson, when he had that fantastic volley, the dipping volley, he had another shot for the edge of the box in the second half, I think it was. They were kind of the sign of what was to come from, so near but so far away. He played all right, and we played all right as well. But again, coming away from Parkhead, nothing needs draw, wasn't a disaster. We probably felt we could win these games, or we should be winning these games in the balance of squad power and first 11s that were playing. It was again, we're talking about this season as if it just turned into a humdrum procession. That game probably the sign of it, because even a Rangers team with 20% more power would have won that game.
Well, you're probably right. So, okay, 5 out of 6. It's the new promoted team, Kilmarnock, at Ibrox the following Saturday. Derek Johnston, who knows a thing or two about the importance of getting an early goal in a Rangers career, said on Radio Clyde before the game, fancy Rangers to win by a few today, and for Ferguson to open his account. Well, he couldn't have gone much closer, John. First half shot, Fizz just wide, and then he nearly opened the scoring early in the second half. His left foot shot just hit the post. And maybe that anxiety about Ferguson getting off the mark, because it is a thing for a new striker, especially one with a big reputation, big price tag, to get that first goal. Maybe that's transferred over to others, because Rangers yet again were scrappy and poor, this time sensationally punished. Tommy Burns was the manager. His side were value for their win. They were ahead twice, with a Stephen Presley header sandwiched in the middle. In other circumstances, John Presley's header would have been a proud moment for him and his family, but few remember it because of his late error when he dithered in the ball in his own corner, lost possession. Kilmarnock, through a face from Rangers pass, Bobby Williamson snatched the winner. Ali Maxwell, not particularly impressive either. I mean, there's scrappiness, John. There is, that chaotic game at Dens Park from the season before we talked about. Rangers are 19 months unbeaten at home in all competitions. The best of France and England have not been able to do anything. Newly promoted Kilmarnock. This was a shock. Someone, a friend of mine described it at similar age as a loss of innocence. Now, again, Rangers slow starters, but when this summer of 93, having the two seasons that we've just seen, especially the season we've just seen, it felt like something different. We were in the midst of something different. Rangers do not lose at home to teams like this. But I guess maybe that's just my younger outlook on it. But this did feel, this stung.
It stung. I think it stung because it was Tommy Burns. To a degree, I think it stung because it was Bobby Williamson. I think because I'm older and I've had a few kicks, and at this point, through many seasons, losing games early on that we shouldn't, either home or away. Was it not a really late goal? I know you said Presley.
Injury time.
I think it's Kilmarnock scoring a winner on injury time. Yeah, that brings future nightmares. Yeah, it's just a wee kick in it. You can trace it back later. At the time, you just think it's one of those things where being poor, it's one each, it's late, and we've had no chance to respond. And yeah, I'm not as despondent as you guys. I think I'm still in a bubble, which I shouldn't have been in, or no, we're going to do it. I think there is a feeling, just as Andy was describing, you're describing, Duncan Ferguson, what you're describing is almost Morris Johnson-like in the first, few games. Even the game at Parkhead, nothing each. Was Mojo's debut a nothing each crap? Or was it 1-1? But it wasn't exciting. It wasn't exciting, and he had a couple of chances, etc. Come to this, the big man's trying to score. We expected to beat Kilmarnock. We thought they might score or whatever, because there were a bunch of them playing decently. I mean, they had come up playing, from recollection, and maybe I'm completely wrong, decent football. And they came out that day and had a go. It wasn't what we're used to, say, like a Motherwell or whatever, putting everything up. It was still a hell of a shot. It was a shot. Disappointment. It just was. There's nothing worse than to ruin your weekend, your Saturday night, than losing a last-minute goal at Ibrox to a team you should be horsing.
We just weren't used to that feeling. That ruined Saturday nights, exactly it. Just to be clear, I wasn't despondent. I never thought, well, that's the league over. But it was just, what have I just seen there? And I wasn't used to being... That's exactly it. I was not used to being in a huff on a Saturday night. It was some time since that had happened, seriously. Andy, your recollections on that afternoon?
It was a cold hard slap in the face, because we hadn't felt like that for a while, and as Sean says, Tommy Burns factor added a wee bit of edge to it, but it was also, there's nothing worse than football in a last minute defeat. So it wasn't expected. It certainly wasn't expected at home. It wasn't expected against a team that was just promoted. It was a bit, I'm just going to say a disaster. It wasn't a disaster, because you're still walking away from that thinking, we'll still win the league. This is the mindset, but it wasn't enjoyable. I can't remember if there was question marks entering into my head at that point in time. I don't think we were thinking too hard about it. I think it was probably down to a freak, and at some point you're going to lose a football match.
Yeah, there is that, but it was a jolt for sure. Thanks, guys, for an interesting discussion on actually quite an interesting summer at Ibrox. It feels kind of groundbreaking and big and splashy, but actually under the surface maybe belied a lack of ambition after all, and maybe a lack of pace when urgency was maybe required. Thank you, Andrew.
My pleasure.
See you in a couple of weeks, John.
Yeah, see you then. Unfortunately, we showed more aggression in the pod tonight than the passivity we saw in that summer transfer window.
How was ever this?
Should have been the other way round.
Probably. If Duncan Ferguson's effort in that second half was inches to the left, then history may well have been so much different, with a big signing off and running, perhaps adding a second as Rangers stroll to a comfortable victory. However, as seductive as sliding doors are, it was never likely to be a smooth process. On the Monday morning after the Kilmarnock defeat, Ferguson was convicted of assault for the second time, following an incident in an Anstruther hotel in November, with the sentencing scheduled for the middle of September. A record signing, facing a spell in prison, and a 19-month unbeaten home record, all shattered before August was over. It was clear this was going to be a very different season for Rangers, fine margins or not. David and Alan will join me next week to discuss a chaotic 3 months in Rangers history, the worst run of league form since before Souness and wouldn't be seen again until 2005, a shock European defeat, and yet an exciting and glorifying League Cup success. It's never dull at Ibrox. Until next time, bye for now.